Excited to have Kim Flottum with us this morning. He's author of numerous beekeeping books and is also editor of Bee Culture magazine, right around the corner from us here in Medina, Ohio. And Kim's had travels far and wide, and when I called him this winter, he said ethics is a question he'd like to ponder for and introduce these ideas for other beekeepers. So Kim, thanks so much for joining us. I'll turn the floor over to you.
One thing I wanted to add, just a couple of things, if I may. We not only do Bee Culture magazine, but we do beekeeping your first 3 years. And if you are if you are just starting out, that may be something you might be interested in. And I don't even know, Denise, if you know, we have started a podcast. Bee Culture started a podcast called Beekeeping Today Podcast. It just started, so it isn't on iTunes yet, but it should be by the end of this week, I think. So if you want, take a look at that. It's been fun getting it started, and Denise and I were wrestling with the technology of this program earlier this morning, and I can tell you, Denise, wrestling with the technology of iPods is no better. So, all right. The business of bees ethics, and here's where I want to go with this. So bear with me for just a minute. When I say business, I consider the fact that if you have one colony of bees in your backyard, you are in the business of bees. You are doing something with those bees. You may not be making money with them. You may not be selling anything, but you are dealing with, maybe in almost no way at all, but in some ways the public, with your family, with anybody that you are in contact with. So when I'm talking about ethics, basically it's kind of a generalization, and I want you to think about it of things you should be doing with bees, not things that you have to do, perhaps, but things that you should be. And often, too often in life, even if it's legal, you shouldn't be doing it. And that's kind of the things that I want to look at today. So what we're going to talk about ranges all the way from bees in your backyard to being a 20,000 colony commercial pollinator and all bunches of things in between. I don't have an order, small to large or large to small or bad to good or good to bad. I'm just going to hit some highlights, and the highlights that I'm hitting are things that have come up in my career of things that I see need to be explored. So it may appear to be disjointed at the beginning, I think, but perhaps by the end you'll see that there really was some order to it, or at least make some sense of it. Here's we could stop here, and this is good ethics, helping new beekeepers succeed and being a good beekeeper. What else is there? After this, everything else comes in second, I think. Well, of course, it's not quite that simple. Helping new beekeepers succeed runs all the way from being a mentor in your club to running a successful bee supply store and making sure that what you sell is good stuff. Being a good beekeeper is everything from making sure that your neighbors aren't bothered by your bees to making sure that your business is successful so you are able to pay your help. Both of these run all the gamuts, and pretty much that's what we see. Ethics, safety, and common sense of being in the bee business, and by that, you need to treat fairly, and you as a beekeeper want to be treated fairly, whether you're a customer, whether you're a consumer. Certainly the uninformed and unprotected public, unprotected there emphasized. If you are a pollinator, you want to deal with growers ethically, other beekeepers, yourself, your family, and your business. All of these things kind of begin to get in the way when you're looking at what do my bees do, what am I doing as a beekeeper, what are we doing as an industry and as a community of beekeepers. Starting with your customers. If you sell 2 jars of honey a year at work, you are in the business of beekeeping, and it's that small and it's that large. And so no matter what you're selling, you want to be treating the people that you're working with fairly, the people that you're selling things to fairly, whether you're selling packages or queens or nukes or equipment or honey, pollen, or any of the products that you can get from your colony or from the business and the community of bees and beekeeping that you're selling to other people. So it's customers are everywhere. And a customer, if you want to look at it this way, a customer may be the person who calls you to come and get a swarm. And when you come and get that swarm, you're dealing with a person kind of like a customer. And if you deal with them like that, I think you're going to be doing well. If you're a great big store with inventory, maybe you're making some of your own equipment. Maybe you're a dealer for Brushy Mountain or Man Lake or Dadant, and you've got this kind of a store. These are the places that most people think of as beekeeping businesses, and of course they certainly are. And if this is something that you have or are aspiring to do, then there's a whole set of rules that also come into play that you're not going to run into so much as a 2-colony backyard beekeeper. But fair pricing and clean equipment and all of the things. When you walk into this store, how do you want to be treated and what do you want to buy? And that's what store owners need to do to be an ethical business. Think of yourself as the customer and what do you want, and that's what you should be doing if you're going to be running any kind of a store. Lots of people have a stack of stuff on the side in their garage. That's a store. Lots of people have a farm stand with honey, with just a few jars of honey on it and a jar to collect the money in. That's a store. So it runs the whole gamut, I think. Let's see. Well, here's one right now. Talk about queens, buying and reselling if you're raising your own. If you're raising a dozen queens a year and you're selling them for, what is a queen going for now, $30, $40? If you're selling a queen for $40 and it doesn't work, do you have a guarantee? And you can be a 10-colony hobby backyard beekeeper and be selling queens. It doesn't take a ton of equipment and 50 years of experience. You can be selling queens at relatively soon into your career and a relatively small operation. What kind of a guarantee are you giving when somebody buys a queen from you? Are you giving any kind of guarantee? One person I know that sells queens has what they call the taillight guarantee. As long as I can see the taillights on your car, that queen is guaranteed, but the minute you turn the corner, she's your bug. And that person has learned through experience that this is the best way he can operate, and this is the best way, and perhaps it is. Certainly it is for them. If it's a queen that you raised, do you look at it differently than a queen that you bought and resold, bought from a producer out in California or down in Georgia, and are reselling? What is your opinion? What is your feeling about those that you raise compared to those that somebody else raised and you're just the middleman? So there's a difference there. And again, put yourself in the place of the customer. How are you dealing with a queen failure when you just paid $40 for a bug and the person you bought it from says, it was your bug, sorry, as opposed to perhaps some other, and we're going to look at some other things that you might want to be able to do. But guarantees for queens, and the same thing goes for packages and nukes. If you are making nukes from your own colonies, you have a feel for them. If you are buying packages and reselling, not many of us are large enough to shake our own packages but if you're buying and reselling, and how long are they stored, and what was the delivery situation, and all of the things that enter in that can affect the quality of the ultimate product that you're giving to a customer. One of the things that people deal with packages is, again, it's once that package is out of my possession, out of my control, I don't know what you did to it. And I can't be responsible if you don't know what you're doing with a package. Is that fair? And is that equitable? And all of the things that go with that. Same thing with a nuke. What did you do to that nuke when you got it home? Did you actually install it? Did you leave it sit in the garage for a week? All of the things that can happen to either of these products that can go bad happen every year to people who sell them and to buy them. So here's another aspect to look at is if you are selling your own, or even if you're buying nukes from other people, what's inside that box? The responsibility for the care of a nuke after it leaves your place from your customer is one side of the equation, but the other side of the equation is, what did you sell them, and was it good stuff? And way too often we see nukes as a way for beekeepers to get rid of old equipment, old dark comb, old boxes, whatever, too often. And where's the ethics in that? That's just cleaning house, and I found somebody who'll give me good money for bad stuff. And diseases. The law in Ohio says that if you're going to be selling bees, you have to be inspected and be found clean of all of the problems that bees can get, so that the product that you're selling to those people, your customers, can be relatively assured that they're not getting foul brood, they're not getting tons of mites, they're not getting all of the things that can bother bees, and they're getting a pretty clean product. So when they walk out of there, they're fairly comfortable with what they're getting. But you can still, like I said, old equipment and the things that are legal but probably not ethical. And even if it's legal, should you be doing it? And take a look at some of those. Here's a way to fix a lot of this stuff when you are selling bees to people, whether it's five queens a year or 50,000 packages a year. Here's something to consider about, and if you're going to be selling queens and nukes to people, a suggestion that I've seen, and it seems to work really well for the people who are doing it, is, if you want to buy my bees, you take my class. That way I'm going to teach you what you need to know, so that when you get that package home, those queens home, that nuke home, that you're going to do what you're supposed to do to pretty much ensure that you'll be successful. I don't want to sell you a package and have it die, and you come back and complain about it, and I have no idea what you did. If I teach you what to do, if I show you how to do it, if I maybe even mentor and go with you and help you do it, I can be pretty assured that you're going to be successful. A successful beekeeper is going to remain as a customer. And again, whether it's 2 queens a year or thousands and hundreds and thousands of packages or nukes, I want my customers to be successful, because the third time you lose that nuke, you're going to quit keeping bees, and I've lost a customer. So what I want is you to be successful. And let's take it another step. Do you get our newsletter or our email blasts on a weekly or monthly basis telling you what you should be doing now and wherever it is that you have your bees and your store? And that way I'm going to be pretty certain that at least I've gone overboard in helping you be successful. I've given you the information you need. I can't make you do it. I can't make you go out and check your bees once a week or once every 2 weeks, but I can tell you that you should be doing that, and what you should be looking for, and what you should be doing when you see this, that, and the other thing. I can't make you, but at least I've given you the information, and I've gone overboard to make sure that you're going to be successful as much as I can. Consumers. These are customers, certainly, but these are probably not beekeeper customers. They are consumers, and these are the people who are buying your honey, or buying your candles, or buying your jars of pollen in health food stores. Is it what you say it is? Is this pure natural honey? Is this local honey? Is this what are you telling people, and is it what you are telling them? And would you give it to your kids? And that's always comes down to me. To me, that's the test. If I'm confident enough in the products that I produce that I would feed it to my family, then I'm confident enough to sell it to consumers, to anybody who knows me or even doesn't know me. So, is it what you say it is? And let's look at that a little bit further here. Wanted to bring this up for just a second. There's been a lot of controversy, and there continues to be controversy. If I hold a jar up to the light and there's no pollen in it, is it honey? And there's a lot of people that say it's not honey. You said it was pure natural honey, and yet I see no pollen in it. And if there's no pollen in it, that means that it's probably mostly high fructose corn syrup or some other sweetener, and you are not selling me what you say you are selling me. Is honey honey if it doesn't have pollen in it? And most of the big packers are, when they filter honey, the pollen's all gone. There's nothing left because they don't want pollen grains in there to aid in crystallization. It's pure. That's the way it is. If by the same token, people who are adulterating honey, and a lot of it from offshore, there's not going to be pollen in there either. So how do you tell the difference? And therein lies the issue. Are you comfortable with what you're selling? If you're buying honey from somebody and you look at it and there's no pollen, what's in it? And do you take a step back and say, I'm gonna need to think about this. I'm looking at what you're selling me here, and I gotta think about it in a minute. Or honey's honey because whether it has pollen in it or not. I can't answer this for you. I know that pure honey that's been filtered to the point where pollen is removed is still pure honey. There's no doubt about that. However, there's a lot of what is labeled as honey out there that doesn't have pollen in it because there was never pollen in it, and to remove. And therein lies similar looking products, very different product to deal with. How are you going to work with that one? Beekeepers are often our own worst enemies in terms of what else is in your honey, and you can see the things that are in there. And where I'm heading mostly is beekeeper applied in agriculture chemicals. And you can be pretty certain that if you use any of these chemicals, with the exception of the organic acids, there's going to be something in there. Parts per billion, perhaps. But there's parts per billion, and we as beekeepers have a responsibility to reduce that parts per billion to even no parts per billion, so that what we are selling, again, would you feed it to your children? And if you're comfortable with that concept, feeding it to your children, then I would be certain that you have done everything you can do to make sure that the honey that you're selling me is going to be good. Another issue that comes up a lot of times with I'm going to say larger beekeepers, packers. Sometimes you can see this happens. I've got honey. I'm buying honey from 2 or 3 or 4 different people, and my own, and I'm trying to fill contracts with grocery stores and with farm markets and what have you. And I've got honey with high moisture or some with bad flavor. I've got dark honey that I want a little bit lighter, so I'm adding a lighter honey to it. I've got honey that either has no flavor or has an off tint, and I'm going to add something to that to reduce that. I'm going to add honey with pollen in it, so that when you look at that jar, you can say, well, of course it's honey, it's got pollen in it. Overheated honey, of course, has its own distinctive flavor. If you've ever tasted it, you know exactly what I mean. If you haven't, that's good, because you haven't done that. Overheating can ruin honey, or can certainly taint the flavor just a little bit. One of the pieces of equipment that beekeepers have that gets abused more than I'd like to say are the water jacketed heaters that they'll pour in a lot of. They'll fill up with honey and they'll bottle off half or a third or 2/3 of it and leave the rest in there and then forget about it. And when they come back in 2-3 days or a week, that honey's been at that temperature for way too long, and the flavors change, the quality's changed, but you don't want to waste that honey, so you just mix in some good stuff with it and hope that it covers. The other thing that we do or can be done is diluting of the varietal content. We just had a tremendous locust flow here in Ohio this spring. Wonderful. I have supers of, I'm pretty sure, mostly pure locust honey. Now, locust honey has a very distinctive flavor, and I can pretty much tell locust honey, and I can tell locust honey that's essentially pure, and I can tell locust honey that's been diluted. And the problem, one of the problems we often have here in Ohio is that right at the end of the locust flow, we get several other plants that come in to blossom, and if you don't get your supers off and isolate that locust honey, you're going to have a blend of locust and so that's one issue. But the other issue is I could take that locust honey and I could cut it by a third using some other honey that I had left over from last year. Still tastes like locust. Can I sell it for locust honey? Well, the law says on varietal honey, and I kind of challenge you to tell me how this was going to work. The law says that the predominant source, floral source, should be whatever I say it is, locust honey, which means that I could have a jar of honey that's 20%, 21% locust, and everything else that's in there is 19% or less. The predominant source, floral source for that honey is locust, and I can say that it's locust. The other definition is 51%, which means that 49% is something else, but I can say that it's locust honey. Here's where I challenge you to sleep well at night if you're calling predominant 20% locust honey, locust honey. Therein lies the challenge. And if even 51%, you can say it's local honey. The law says, but it's 49% something else. So diluting, you can do it intentionally, and that's done, or you can do it because that's the way nature said it's going to happen, and there you are. It's 49% something else, but it's 51% locust, and I can call it locust honey. And coming down to, is your honey perfect? Did you feed sugar syrup too long this spring? Was it too long and too cold? Was it too cold, too long this spring that bees couldn't fly and they ran out of their winter stores and you were feeding, and suddenly there was a honey flow, and when you extracted, you got some of that high fructose corn syrup or sugar syrup that was you were feeding up until way later than you normally do. Are you comfortable with that? Do you know? Is the honey that you harvested in late spring this year really all of the honey, all honey, or is there some of what you were feeding in there? Is your honey perfect? Can are you comfortable with the fact that there isn't anything else in there? And what if there is? What if you know that there is? You see that frame of capped honey there? Well, I think it's honey, and there's some sugar syrup in there. What do I do with it? Do I just go, well, they won't know and they can't tell, and I gotta get it uncapped because I need the equipment, and or do you feed it back to the bees, or what do you do? And therein is the question of ethics. What do you do with that when you know that there's an issue with the quality of the honey in that frame? And then what about the honey that you buy? It's real easy to get into the honey business. You have steady customers. You have customers that buy high quality honey. You have customers that are buying kind of bulk honey, maybe a little less quality. And by less quality, I'm meaning it's a blend. It's a wildflower blend. It's an early spring blend, but it's not a varietal, or it's not as light as you would like, but they don't mind. That's what I mean by a little less quality. But what is the stuff that you're buying? What's in that 60 that you just picked up down south when you were there, or up north, or wherever it was that you went and got it? And how do you know? And are you sure? And there's the question. Do you trust the person? Even if you trust the person, how is he doing this year? Is he challenged or she challenged with having enough honey to be able to sell you to stay into business? And it's questionable, and there's a lot of people that will say, I've been working with this guy for 40 years and I trust him, and that's money in the bank almost always, and I'm comfortable with that. But when the new people show up all of a sudden that you don't know, that you haven't worked with before, so what do you do? How do you challenge not that person, but how do you challenge that honey to make sure that it is what they said it was? And you've got friends that can taste it. You can certainly pay to have it tested. You can take a look and see if there's pollen in it. You can have it pollen tested. You can spend a lot of money and have it tested for pesticides and all sorts of things. How far do you go? How much do you want to spend? How much do you trust the source of the honey? And that's kind of what it comes down to, is how well would you feed it to your kids, and how comfortable are you with the product that you're holding in that pail? Something totally different when it comes to bees. It comes to being a beekeeper. Safety. And are you as safe as you can be with your bees? I can't tell you how many times I've seen people pick up 8 or 10 packages, throw them in the back of the pickup, and take off, hoping that they don't bounce out, hoping that nothing happens. People who pollinate for a living, throwing 4 or 5 colonies on the back, closing the gate and hoping that they stay in when you hit that big rut in the field that you didn't know was there. What about robbing? Is robbing, being what you're doing as a beekeeper in your backyard someday sets off a robbing incident? Are you keeping your bees out of your neighbor's pool or bird bath or air conditioning vent? And just all sorts of things that can go wrong with bees and the public, the consumer, the person that isn't a beekeeper, doesn't want to be a beekeeper. And your job is to make sure that they aren't hampered, don't have a problem with your bees. And like I said, moving is the big one. I've seen too many people not know how to move bees that are moving them and shouldn't be. And there's safe ways to do it and there's unsafe ways to do it. And if you don't know the difference, find out. Talk to people who have done it, learn the knots, learn to get the straps, do the right trailer, do everything right, because that picture in the middle tells it all. And I'll take this another step when it comes to trucks and accidents and bees. Does your local association have any contact with local law enforcement? So when that semi goes off the exit ramp on that freeway down the road a piece for you, and suddenly there's 515 colonies of bees blocking a freeway, and it's 4 in the morning. And do the local police department know where to get a pickup in the middle, or a forklift in the middle of the night? How many beekeepers can you call right now and get out there to help? Does your local law enforcement and fire departments have any protective gear? This is something that the beekeeping community should be always attuned to and be working with, making sure that the people who are responsible for this, if there's injured people, can they get to them and remove them to safety? If there's damaged equipment, can they get it fixed? Can you get the bees out of there? Do you go in and just foam the whole load and kill everything? Even that's not gonna solve the problem. You still need beekeepers, forklifts, and people who know how to handle bees. So moving bees can be an issue, but as a group, as an association, I think we could probably do better, but even we still need to be attuned, because things change every year. New people come on, beekeepers leave, new beekeepers come on, police departments change. So when it comes to moving bees, be safe, but also know that there's a bigger picture out there for moving bees, and we should be a part of it. When you're working your bees in the backyard, are you doing everything right? This is just good neighbor beekeeping. Pure and simple, but what are the ethics? You get home from work and it's 5 o'clock and I got to do this with the bees, and you look across the fence and there's 17 kids out there playing softball. Is this the right thing to do at the right time of day? Probably not. Are you placing your bees in your yard so that you have flight paths and all of those things so that they aren't challenging your neighbors either to the back or to either side? Are you making sure that your bees always have water, always have food, all of these things, so that your bees aren't challenging other people? And to me, that just I wouldn't want it, and I'm hoping that you don't, and that you're doing all of the things necessary to make sure that your neighbors are happy neighbors and don't mind you having bees. When you've got a commercial yard, of course, you have a whole different problem, a whole different setup, and you're not going to have this in your backyard. But here's the deal with big bee yards is when you take your bees, if you're taking bees to almonds, for instance, and you set them down and there's 20,000 colonies as far as you can see, like that bottom picture, what is your responsibility for not sharing anything bad with the people who also have bees there, and what is their responsibility for not sharing what they have with you? And a good friend who does this routinely, John Miller, he runs about 17,000 colonies. His advice is be hygienic. And he couldn't sum it up better, I don't think. And he even takes this another step. He says, if everybody in that big bee yard in the bottom has done everything they can to be hygienic, if their mite counts are low, if they are disease-free, if they all have queens, all of the good beekeeping things, the chances of bringing home everything everybody brings to California is reduced. You're not going to get away from it, but it's reduced. But the other thing that John was looking at that I found fascinating was that he walks the orchard that he's going to be pollinating, and what he's looking for is how well has the orchard owner been taking care of his trees? Are there a lot of diseased trees out there? Are there any problems that John can see down the road that are going to require spraying when his bees are in that orchard? And so the orchard owner too has to be hygienic, and no matter what you're pollinating, this we're going to talk about pollination a lot here in just a bit, because there's a lot of ethics that go on in pollination on both sides of this equation. But when you're dealing with commercial bee side, I can't leave you with a better message than be hygienic and hope that your neighbors are. Do we practice community service? And I absolutely believe that we should. We should be working with our communities, schools, anything that we can do. Swarm call services, all of the things that need to be dealt with. One of the things that I just stumbled upon, I guess you'll say. I was in Florida recently, and I was at a meeting there, and 3 of the people that were in that meeting make their living removing bees from houses. 3 of them in one association. That tells you how many wild bees there are. I was in Central Florida, and there's a lot of bees that aren't in beekeepers' hives. But the problem that they brought up was that when a homeowner can't get bees removed, or can't remove bees, or can't find a beekeeper to do it, they call an exterminator. That's the first person they call, often. An exterminator comes, finds the hive, kills the hive in the house, packs up and goes home. They don't take it apart, remove the wax and the comb and the honey and the dead bees and put it back together and fill the space so that another colony can't move in there. Their job is done. The bees are dead, I'm going home. Well, what that leaves is a cavity, A, that can be refilled, but it also leaves a cavity filled with poison. And your bees are going to find that cavity, and your bees are going to bring home poison honey, and now you've got that problem. And what they're heading for, what Florida is looking at doing, is making it the homeowner's responsibility, so that doesn't happen. And they're looking at, or they're thinking of looking at, making exterminators more or less, I'm not going to say responsible, but yes, I'll come and kill your bees, but you have to sign a piece of paper that says you're going to fix that cavity, making me not responsible for that effort. So it becomes the homeowner's responsibility to fix that problem, and I think we up in the north would be good to look at that issue too, because if an exterminator comes, they're going to leave that issue, and the homeowner, may or may not do anything about it. We as beekeepers certainly have. It would be good if we had the responsibility of making sure that exterminators never had to get called, but I have neither the time or the tools to remove bees from a second floor soffit. It's not going to happen, and at my age, ladders are out of the question anyway. So. The responsibility of dealing with bees in wrong places comes home to us, but we can probably work to make sure that we're not the bad guys when this happens, but we can't just ignore it either, I think. You have people working for you? Probably if you're mid-sized, you've got some seasonal help that comes in, helps you pull honey, extract, bottle, whatever. Are you treating them fair? A lot of times it's high school kids, and we have a responsibility to make sure that they are safe and that we are taking care of them, and that what we have them doing is realistic in terms of their skills and their maturity, and that they're being paid fairly. And if we have seasonal help that comes in, are they being the H2A issue is a mess. And it's getting messier all of the time, and being able to find good help and keep good help is continually a challenge. So it behooves you to deal with people who work for you not only fairly but over fairly, just because it's hard to get good help and it's hard to keep good help, and you're going to want to be able to do that when you get to that point. So take care of the people who work for you, because they will then take care of you. All right, I want to talk about pollination, because this is what a lot of us can get involved in on a small scale, and we often, as beginners in pollination, not beginning beekeepers, but beginners in pollination, the first few times we're kind of fishing, because we're not really sure exactly what we need to know, what we should be doing. We know that we have to take bees someplace and we have to leave them and we have to come back and pick them up. But let's look at some of the things that you're going to need to know when you're pollination. And I'm going to tell you, here it is. A good contractor is going to answer every question you have, and that contract is written before you pick up B1, and it is understood, and somebody else is going to have looked at it for you, with you, and a good handshake is not a good pollination contract, period. I don't care if you've been working with this guy for 50 years. If that guy drops dead in the middle of fruit bloom, what happens to his orchard, to his equipment, and to your bees? You need a pollination contract. Too many of us don't have one, and there's other reasons to have a contract other than making sure that everybody knows their responsibility. Is it makes both sides of this equation write down what they're supposed to do, not supposed to do, and how to do it. The grower will know what to expect from you because it's in the contract, and you will know what to expect from the grower because it's in the contract. And if you don't have this contract and you haven't gone through this process, and you deal with a grower and something happens that damages your bees, and he just looks at you and go, "Well, I've always done it that way. Didn't you know?" And no, you didn't know. So even if you write a contract and neither of you sign it, so it becomes a legal document, at least you have gone through the work table to make sure that you both understand what's kind of expected from each other, and what could go wrong, and how it's going to be covered, and what each person is expected to do. So I'm going to go through a whole bunch of key points that are in a contract, and this is just basic common sense. Who's participating? You and the grower. Or is the grower leasing the land from somebody, and does that change the equation? Sometimes that happens. A grower will be leasing farmland from somebody else, and does that change the equation? Know if that's an issue, and if you need to think about how many colonies are we talking about. I got 50 acres of apples. I want 1 colony per acre. I need 50 colonies, but I want 10 more just to make sure. Or so make sure you know the number of colonies. The quality and delivery dates, and I'm talking about quality, often this just boils down to frames of bees and brood. And that's good, but at what temperature? If you take a look at a colony at 50 degrees, you're going to have bees almost clustered, and they're going to be covering far fewer frames than if you are opening a colony and it's 85 degrees. So spell it out. At what temperature do you need how many frames of bees and brood? And then it's understood. And delivery dates. Delivery dates this year are up in the sky in my part of the world, just because spring was so late. If I would have delivered bees for apples, I would have been about 7 to 10 days early on a normal year up here in Medina County. So delivery date. make sure that that's understood. The price, standards, premium, penalty. How much are you getting paid? We're going to talk a lot more about that. What's okay if you're agreeing at 8 frames of bees and brood at 75 degrees? What if I have 12 frames of bees and brood at 75 degrees? Do I get a premium? What if I only have 9 frames of bees and brood? Is there a penalty on that price? And that should be understood. When are you getting paid, and how much are you getting paid? All of the payment schedule things. You get paid some on delivery, and some when you take them out of the orchard. Everything at the end, maybe 69, 90 days down the road. If he's always been paying 90 days down the road because his other beekeeper said that was okay, do you deal with 90 days down the road? Do you have an offloading site? And by that I mean often growers will say, okay, put everybody right here, right at the front of the orchard, and I will place pallets where I need them placed. Is that okay with you, A? And B, where is that site? And C, can you get in there in the middle of the night? So those sorts of things. Crop location or locations. Up in the northeast corner of Ohio, we have a lot of pickle industry, and often when colonies are rented for pickles, they will pollinate one, and 10 days they'll move them to another field, 10 days to another field, 10 days to another field. They're successive crops because they are planted, pollinated, and harvested. Only they're not continuously harvested. They're one-time harvested with a machine. So your bees are being moved. Are you getting paid for each move? And know that, and be aware of how that's going to work. Should you be paid? Well, I think of course you should be paid. But percent bloom. With apples, that and almonds and things, different orchard crops at 10% bloom, 5% bloom, whatever it is, that so that you can be aware. And are you aware? I think I've got down here somewhere, know more about the crop than the grower knows about the crop, and so you can anticipate growing degree days and percent bloom, and know as much as the grower does about what's going to happen when. When do you get them out of there? Again, is it percent bloom, or is it until the last petal falls? And be aware of what's going on in the orchard. Sometimes what happens is you've got two pollination contracts. You're going to do crop A, and it goes from early May to late May, and you've got crop B, which goes from early June to late June, but the May crop was late, and suddenly you can't get your bees out of the orchard A to get them into orchard B. How do you handle that? And that's one of the contingency plans you need in the back of your mind right now before you ever pick this up. Well, how do I cover another 1,000 colonies or another 10 colonies when this guy's crop is depending on me and I can't get my bees there? Do you have 10 colonies at home you can bring? Do you know somebody that can do it? Have that in the contract, or at least have it in the back of your mind. Pesticides used, and notification, like I said, know your crop better than your grower. What's likely to get sprayed during bloom? And how well does this grower take care of his crop so that the likelihood of that spray is 100%, or maybe often, or maybe hardly ever? And are you going to get notified? He says, I got to spray tonight. Come in and move your bees or cover them or something. So we take it on the chin when we have to do that because the grower isn't taking care of business, or because you weren't notified, or whatever. But at least know that pesticides are going to be sprayed during bloom and that you need notification. What happens if you lose all of your bees over winter? That's happened, and it's going to continue to happen. What's your plan B? You signed this contract last fall with this grower, and now you have no bees. Where are you going to find bees? Insurance. Are your bees insured in somebody else's orchard? Or is any damage that your bees cause to people who work in the orchard or people who are driving by the orchard, if your bees cause that damage, who is responsible? The orchard owner or you? And know that answer. Your insurance, your insurance, and your grower's insurance should be real clear on where that liability lies. And I'm going to talk about a couple of pesticides in a minute. So what happens if somebody comes in and steals your bees? Steals that, 4 bees off a pallet right on the edge of the orchard. Who pays? Is it your problem? Is it the grower's problem? What's the value? You lose 4 colonies. What does it cost you to replace them? And is that in the contract? And again, liability to the public, employees, anything that happens bad because of your bees or your pollination work, who's liable? What happens if the grower says, I don't have the money this year, I just can't pay you? Sorry. Who's responsible? Excess. Can you get into your bees in the middle of the night? And that's important. Or it's important that you know that you can't. At least you're aware of that. So have in your contract when you can and can't get in there, and are there gates, and are there keys, and are they locked, and all of the things that can go wrong, and are there irrigation pipes in the middle of the road that weren't in the middle of the road when you moved your bees in, and how do you know that in the middle of the night? I want to talk just briefly about fungicides and growth regulators. This is the thing that almond people are seeing. They get sprayed during bloom with fungicides and growth regulators to control diseases, and you don't see it when your bees are in the almonds until you've got them home, and about 30 days later you've got colonies crashing all over creation, and it's because of that spray. The bees picked it up, brought it home, stored it, didn't feed it until 20 to 30 days later, and the brood started crashing because it was killing the brood. So again, it's be aware of the sprays and know what the grower is doing and what the grower probably is doing, and if you know your crop is better or as good as the grower, you can anticipate that this is probably going to happen. Still some more acts of God. What do you do if you get the dam breaks and the orchard's flooded, and your bees are somewhere in Illinois or Kentucky? How do you handle acts of God? Who decides when you run into something that isn't in the contract that neither of you expected? Arbitration. Is there somebody you can go to? Again, the orchard owner dies in the middle of the bloom. Are the heirs the owners? How does that handled? Is there always a safe water source? And unfortunately, in orchards and in vegetable crops, that's not possible. What happens is they'll be doing a spray next door in a crop that doesn't bloom and isn't being visited by bees, and when they're done, they empty the tank and there's a puddle of water and bees are visiting it. So you got that. Again, a contract should specify that the responsibility for the colony while pollinating is solely the grower's, not yours. Is that right? Is that where you want to put the responsibility? And there are situations where that's not right. You don't want any responsibility for the grower because they don't know what they're doing. You want it all, but then that puts a lot of work on your back. So know before you go who's responsible for what. And I think there's one final point here we want to look. How much do you charge and when do you get paid? Certainly that's why you're doing this, is you're doing this because you're a business and you're putting money in the bank and you've got to pay bills and you need to make money to stay in business. A way to look at getting paid, maybe think about this is, you know how much it costs you to raise your colony to get it ready for pollination. You've overwintered it. You've got costs involved, time involved, equipment involved. So there's part of your standard price, and then you've got a delivery fee. You got to pick it up. You got to put it on a truck. You got to take it there. You're going to go there 2 or 3 times during the bloom to make sure that the bees are doing okay and things are going well, and then you got to pick them up and take them home. So you've got your standard price plus your delivery costs. And if you're doing business right, you know what those costs are going to be. You know what it costs to get your colony to the point where it's viable for pollination, and then your costs in delivery, visiting, and removal. So it's standard cost plus delivery. And if you're going across the road or just down the road a mile, your delivery costs are going to be a lot less than if you're going 3 counties over or to California. So know your costs. and your standard and delivery costs, and you can come up with a price. And be safe. I think all things considered, being safe is at the top of the list of being an ethical beekeeper. You be safe, your family, the people that you work with, the people that you come in contact with, and I think you'll do well. But be safe. Denise, I think I'm done.
All right, Kim. So, folks, I've turned on the chat pod if you have questions for Kim. You know, Kim, when I contacted you this winter and I asked if you would do a webinar in the series, you mentioned this topic, and you had just come back from New Zealand. And it sounded like maybe there was a story or two in mind. Was there something that you saw? Or I'm sure you've seen lots of things in lots of different places, but was there something particular in New Zealand that made you think of ethics?
Well, yes, New Zealand is the California gold rush. Manuka honey has turned the beekeeping industry in that country upside down, and there are 3 times as many beekeepers in New Zealand now as there were 5 years ago. So if you want to do the comparison of the gold rush, the people that are really making money on Manuka honey are the people that are selling bee supplies to the brand new beekeepers that are trying to get in and get Manuka honey. The issues with ethics in New Zealand and Manuka honey are, I've had this bee yard for 20 years, and suddenly there's 14 other beekeepers who were within, spitting distance of my bee yards. So nobody's making any money. The dilution factor just cancels everybody out. Stealing hives. So that I'll steal hives and I'll make more Manuka honey. Watering down Manuka honey so that the stuff that's the strongest is something in the neighborhood of $50 a pound after it's been aged for a year. You have to age it for a year. But if you water that down, and still are charging as much as you should. The story that really broke was the year before last, I believe it was. There was more Manuka honey sold in the UK, just the UK, than was produced in New Zealand totally. So what people are calling Manuka honey isn't. They're false labeling. Somewhere the middleman or the retail person or the beekeeper or the packer, somewhere in the middle there, something's not right. And they are living with that issue right now in New Zealand, struggling to make sure that everything that they say it is what they say it is, and that it stays the same all the way up the line so the end consumer can take a look. You can buy Manuka honey in Costco right now. And a kilo jar, 2.2 pounds, is selling for about $35, and the level of the quality of the Manuka honey in there, it says it's 5+, which is a rating of how much of the healing factor, the medicinal factor is in there. The stuff that you can buy online or wherever that's 15+ is going to be $75 to $100 for a 50-gram jar. So you can see why I might be tempted to say my honey is better than it really is because the price is crazy. So that's what got me kind of started in this. And we don't have Manuka honey here, of course, but we do have all of these other things. And like I said, how well do you sleep at night when you can take a look at all of the things that you can twist just a little bit to make a little bit more money?